Day during their briefing. All right, so now we want to cross over to the KICC. I understand that Eric Kiraithe is giving a statement there. Let's just cross over and listen in.
The government would want to note with appreciation that the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission, under the stewardship of the new commissioners, has been working overtime to ensure that this election is delivered on time, and specifically that they have gone out of their way to reach out to all stakeholders to make the process as inclusive as practically possible. In the same vein, we would want to remind politicians, the civil society, all other institutions of governance in Kenya, whether you are in executive, whether you are in the judiciary, wherever you are, that a democratic constitution, according to our law, and peaceful electoral process is not only the responsibility of the IEBC, it is the responsibility of all citizens of this country, whether corporate or private, wherever they are. And therefore, we are saying that even if you are in the private sector and you have an opportunity to take an active part, or you are called upon to do so, do it with all the patriotism, because the continuity of our country has a lot to do with our capacity to regularly hold the elections as per the Constitution. It is regularly held elections that give legitimacy to our existence, that give legitimacy to the fact that we continue to thrive on public funds, money raised through taxes and so on. And therefore, it is our responsibility. Once again, the government is fully committed. We would want to reiterate the commitment of the government to ensure that this process is done, and done as per the Constitution on 8th of August. Going down to Baringo operation, the government would want to thank the security personnel on the ground for being courageous and doing their best to ensure that normalcy is restored. However, we have noted with concern a propensity from a section of politicians and civil societies operating in those areas to continue with utterances that deliberately misinterpret the concept of fundamental rights and freedoms guaranteed in our Constitution to imply that some communities are free to pursue their own needs, regardless of the rights of others and the law in this country. We wish to draw the attention of all Kenyans to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, Article 29, which states, and I quote it for you, that everyone has duties to the community in which alone the free and full development of his personality is possible. I viewed in one of our TV stations a program the other day where it was being asserted, and the anchor seemed to be, the rapporteur seemed to just sit and watch, that in certain regions the voting will be religious. That one is a very dangerous way. And responsible journalism cannot encourage issues. It will be according to this religion, it will be according to this clan, it will be according to this tribe. Whatever inclines you to vote the candidate you vote is okay. But trying to influence public opinion that certain religions are prohibited in this area is driving this country very far backward. Section 2 of that article states, in the exercise of his rights and freedoms, everyone shall be subject to such limitations as determined by law, solely for the purpose of securing due recognition and respect for the human rights of others and meeting of the just requirement of morality, public order, and the general welfare in a democratic society. When you look at those stipulations which were adopted in our Constitution, you remember that one of the sources of our Constitution in Article 1 is actually international law. If there is a lot of drought, you cannot solve the problem of drought as it affects you by evading my farm. That is not accepted in a democratic society. That is not legal. That is not orderly behavior. And I am saying that in our Constitution and everywhere in the democratic world, human rights are universal in the most universal sense of the word. Every human being has inherent dignity and has equal and inalienable rights, regardless of his community, size of his farm, his history, where he came from, religion, community, or whatever other. Any assertion to the contrary is discrimination, which is also not accepted. You cannot therefore claim in any way a right of invading another person's land, and such invasion is a violation of that person's right and purely criminal. The government of Kenya will therefore continue to vigorously ensure that every citizen, including the citizens who are legally resident in Kenya, enjoys full protection under the law from crime, fear, or intimidation of whatever nature. We cannot continue asking investors from other countries to come and invest here, while those who have invested here in range management practices, because let us not delude ourselves. We have talked about these large ranches. They are not larger than the land we occupy in small scale. Why is there pasture and water there? It is purely because they heeded what the waterman said, stored water, reduced their animals, and managed their pasture so that during the drought they are able to overcome and to economically continue running the business of farming. On the other hand, we want to keep animals without limit. We want to take pride in the number of animals we have. When the weatherman says there will be drought, we ignore. When you are told manage your animals, we ignore. And then we claim a right to that pasture when we have degraded our own land through unviable practices of grazing and land management. And therefore, as journalists, whereas we sympathize and the government will make and is making every effort with the international partners to ensure that those people affected by drought are assisted to overcome it. And all of you have seen the efforts made. We must continue telling our people that if you want to continue keeping cattle, you must take measures that ensure that when drought comes, they survive, because it is your private property. Tomorrow, if there is rain, the government cannot go and take a few bulls from any pastoralists so that the journalists in Nairobi can have a feast. You pay for it. And in modern times, we have pastoralists here, and we have pastoralists in the country. The practice of animals following pasture is dying very fast because the land is not expanding and we have increasing. You know the numbers we were in 1970 and where we are today. And therefore, people have taken pasture to the animals, not taking animals to the pasture. And I think with the success of devolution and the efforts we have seen in very many county governments, this should come to fruition without unnecessary conflict. And therefore, we know that there are very many law-abiding citizens in Laikipia, in Elgeyo Marakwet, in Pokot, and all those affected areas. Upon them to cooperate with the security agencies there so that they even create an environment where relief effort is able to reach every needy person. In terms of drought, actually, we would wish to note that with the support we have received from our partners, at least 95% of the schools which could have closed or which were already closing because of drought have resumed. The feeding programs are going on well, and other efforts are continuing. And therefore, that is what we wanted to share with you today. Unless we have questions, I know you have questions. I would like to note that when the government changed the model of government advertisements, there are those people who came up to say the government is killing